All right, moving on to the next presentation. The topic is virtual reality, augmented reality, and the road to mixed reality. Please welcome our speaker, Mr. George Stepancich, CEO of Envisioner LLC. George, please.
Thank you. Oh, I don't need that. I got this. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So, can you hear me okay? Great. All right. Well, thank you to Global Sources for having me, and thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hear a little bit about augmented reality, virtual reality, and the road to mixed reality. So a little bit of statistics just to get us started here in terms of the market. If you look at the slide, if you look at the graphs on the left, you'll see the estimated shipments for virtual reality versus augmented reality. In blue, you see the virtual reality shipment units by the year 2021 is predicted to be roughly around 72 million. And the shipments for augmented reality is predicted to be about 27.3 million. Now, if you shift over to the right, that tells a different story in terms of the amount of revenue that's going to be generated from those collective shipments. It's actually just inverted. The revenue from augmented reality is going to be about $48.7 billion, and the revenue generated from virtual reality is going to be about $18.6 billion. So the projections are that we're going to see a lot more revenue, even though we may see some more unit shipments from virtual reality. The profit is going to be driven from augmented reality, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Whoop. So this is a rather busy slide. I apologize. You probably can't see all the details on it, but it kind of gives you an idea of the complexity and the ecosystem for this thing we call virtual reality. And I would also include that some of these same components and elements are the same components and elements that we see in the augmented reality too. I think if you maybe poll most consumers, well, if I were to ask the audience, what would be if I say virtual reality, how many of you instantly think of head-mounted displays or virtual reality glasses? Yeah? I'd be curious to see what other people think, but let's kind of go over this slide a little bit because this will give us some details. You see kind of three different buckets here for applications versus tools and platforms and infrastructure. That's on the vertical axis. On the horizontal axis, you see head-mounted displays, user input. You see development tools, reality capture, distribution platforms. And then you see a lot of things called game studios, VR sports and live events, location-based entertainment, content studios, film studios, healthcare and wearables, VR education, virtual tourism, content, social, virtual enterprise, journalism, and VR analytics. So you can see that the entire ecosystem is made up of more than just head-mounted displays or viewers. But the reality is that we're going to see a lot of businesses that are going to be integrated, and they're going to pick and choose which one of these various areas that they'll play in. So let's talk a little bit about virtual reality. I think the near term is really speaks more towards virtual reality. So here we have the Oculus Rift, and I'm going to play a little video here.
Welcome to your first mission, Agent 34. We are getting reports of a hotspot in the city. Please investigate. And remember, Robo-Ready values you.
Take home the Oculus Rift and Touch bundle now.
That wasn't a commercial for Oculus, so I skipped over the sales pitch there. But the idea is kind of this is what Oculus is trying to push in terms of what they're defining themselves to be as part of the Rift. So this is another competitor, HTC Vive, and let's see what their video looks like. Okay, so two different themes, right? So the first theme, Oculus, real gaming oriented, wouldn't you say? I mean, you feel like you're right in the game. It's geared towards shoot 'em up, first shooter kind of action, right? In the second video, we see a little bit more of the take from Vive, where they transport you to Mount Everest, right? So you're sitting there on top of Mount Everest. It's day, it's night, and you might notice that they were using all these different kinds of hand controllers, right? So Vive's point of view is, at least from their own marketing material, is they're going to transport you to a different world, but within this world. Of course, they can also take you to some gaming animations, but that's really what they're trying to push on you. And in the case of Oculus, more towards gaming. So we're getting kind of a sense and feel of the market direction that they're taking on. Anybody can guess which way this is going to go? We'll see. So as you would guess, Sony and PlayStation is going to be more geared towards gamers, I believe as well. And they kind of give you a little bit of a taste for this kind of HoloLens looking type of apparatus. So that's more or less going to be the transition over to virtual reality. So they're kind of setting a little bit of a teaser there, I believe. But these are just three examples of some companies and how they're presenting themselves or positioning themselves. In a few more slides, we'll take a look at HoloLens and a couple other examples as well. In the meantime, I wanted to share something that's kind of unique in terms of what you're going to see in terms of how products are going to come together in terms of accessorizing that experience. So in the case of Oculus or in the case of the Vive, we saw these hand controllers. You're going to see probably more integration of different types of accessories that's going to accessorize the head-mounted displays here. In this case, this is a virtual, they call it the hard lights, a virtual reality suit that uses haptics to more or less make you feel that you're in the moment of the reality that you're experiencing. So we'll watch this little video here.
VR games rely on sight and sound alone to engage the user. Never before has hardware existed to let you feel the virtual world. Until now. Immerse yourself in the sensation of touch and experience virtual reality gaming like never before. This is the hard light suit.
Hi, my name is Morgan Cinco. I am the CEO and founder of Nullspace VR, and these are my co-founders.
I'm Jordan Brooks, head of product.
I'm Lucian Copeland, head of R&D.
The hard light suit is a haptic feedback vest designed specifically for VR gaming. It uses vibration pads and sensors to transform in-game actions into real-world sensations.
Haptics are your sense of touch. Haptic pads allow us to reproduce those same sensations. The hard light suit features 16 individually activated haptic pads, enabling extremely precise touch feedback. Feel a sword clash against your armor. Experience a virtual rainstorm, or even box with your friends. It's all possible with the hard light suit.
The hard light suit uses inertial sensors to mirror physical movements in-game. Raise your arm to deflect bullets, curve your back to dodge arrows, or punch a zombie in the face. The hard light tracking system also lets you see your entire avatar, not just a pair of floating hands and a head.
We designed the hard light suit to be adjustable and breathable, so people of all body types can game comfortably. Adjustable straps on the abdomen, arms, and shoulders allow users to custom fit the suit to their body.
Great games are the key to great VR. We're launching with 10 awesome hard light compatible games, but that's just the start. Our easy-to-use API makes it simple for developers to add hard light compatibility to existing games. And our hardware development kit is already in the hands of developers across VR platforms. We've also created a huge library of immersive haptic effects so that developers can quickly add realistic sensations to their games. We've also developed an audio-only mode, which enables simplified audio-based haptics in all the games you love.
Once you try really good haptic feedback, you will notice what it's like to not have it. You get dialed into, with more senses than ever, your experience, and you're able to perform at a level that you were never able to perform at before.
With the support of experienced manufacturing partners and scalable part suppliers, we're prepared to ship the hard light suit to Kickstarter backers around the world.
Our vision for Nullspace VR is to bridge the virtual and real worlds by making haptic feedback available to everyone. To that end, we've spent years designing and prototyping the hard light suit into the finished, gamer-ready product it is today. Now, all we need is the support of VR enthusiasts like you to back our Kickstarter and be the first to experience the next generation of VR gaming.
Okay, so that's the haptic suit. Again, geared mostly towards gamers, right? I don't think I see anybody in the audience here that would be walking around the show wearing one of those vests on, correct? But you know, it's an interesting thought experiment because, yeah, maybe that's kind of this big, bulky suit that provides this vibration and sense of touch and that sort of thing. And again, it's kind of combining the experience of the brain versus the physical reality of the body and how those two things interact and play off of each other. But I would venture that, or I would propose that a lot of the technology that you see in that big bulky suit is probably going to make its way into everyday clothing. So that's really when things I think will get interesting because you would be able to experience things without having to necessarily wear a big bulky suit, but experience the physical sensations that are happening in and around the virtual and the augmented reality world. Any takers for controlling devices with your mind? Anybody want to wear something like that? All right, so this is a company called Neurable that uses a BCI interface, and they're claiming that the response time will be such that when I think about it, I'll be able to play a game. The reality is that if you Google BCI or if you look into BCI, BCI has been around for a long time. In fact, I just read something today where Facebook is getting into brain control interface as well. So you're going to see a lot more activity. I would also say that the technology is such that you don't necessarily need to wear something that's goofy looking like this particular device. Nobody's going to want to wear anything like that, so obviously this is really being used more in the lab for research. But the technology is getting to the point where it's becoming smaller and smaller, where you can pick up brain waves not only on top of the head, but you can pick up brain waves across the body too. In fact, there's technology that's available out there today that's being used by a company in the United States that does a brain wave interface for helping kids with ADHD. And you can even use it for command and control. Whether or not it's fast enough to be used for a gaming application is probably too soon to tell, but I think over time we're going to be seeing command and control for brain control interface devices being natural extensions of these augmented reality and virtual reality devices. And this is an example of what I was just talking about. So this is a Kickstarter-backed project by Mindset that's working with Onkyo, the consumer electronics company. And what they've done is they've taken a pair of audio headsets and they've embedded sensors into the headset. And when you put the headset on, you can essentially do what this guy's doing with all these electrodes. Now, is there more latency this way versus that way? Probably. But in terms of use cases, the idea is that you can be watching, or in this case, you'd be listening to music, and you might be working on your computer, and you could determine whether or not you're in a peak state of performance or what your cognitive load is and that sort of thing. So here's some very interesting ways of being able to take the brain and use the brain waves that we generate when we think or when we're even sleeping, and then use that in such a way to embed it in a consumer type of a device. So it's not a leap of faith really to understand that if this is going to be in a headset, it could easily be integrated into a virtual reality world too. So think of this kind of a device or a kind of functionality being embedded into an Oculus or a Vive or a PlayStation or a gaming PlayStation headset. So that's sort of just some things to think about and ponder. So we talked more about the virtual reality side. And I think there's again, what we're going to see here, and the whole topic of this discussion is augmented reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, and the road to mixed reality. Some people are referring already to augmented reality as being mixed reality. So I'll just, again, if we have to label things a little bit, the virtual reality is about transporting us to a different world. The augmented reality is really about mapping the virtual world onto the physical world. And so why is that important? Well, because I think a lot of it will have to do with how we experience life in general. We experience life in general by what we see in front of us. What we see in front of us has to be natural. We don't like necessarily wearing big old bulky headsets when we're trying to process our own world. And so Bob Iger, who is the CEO of Disney, more or less has said no to virtual reality headset at Disney parks. And he's going to be aiming for implementing augmented reality into their theme parks. So in Disneyland and Disney World and these other places, you're not going to see the traditional virtual reality game or ride. And I'm sure that if you've been to some of these theme parks, you can put a headset on and You can do this virtual reality roller coaster ride and some of these other things. And in Los Angeles, they have the Harry Potter world where you can be transported through these virtual, again, it's more or less kind of an extension of 3D, but your mind is rolling around on one of these different rides. Personally, they make me sick, but some people can tolerate them. I personally can't. So I definitely will wait and hope that the augmented reality becomes more of the norm. So this is the HoloLens from Microsoft, and why don't we take a look and see kind of their take on things.
Microsoft HoloLens brings holograms into your real world. Using transparent lenses, spatial sound, and an understanding of your environment, holograms look and sound like they're actually part of the world around you. That is mixed reality. With Microsoft HoloLens, holograms are viewed through the holographic frame centered in the middle of your view. This preserves your peripheral vision, so you can move freely and connect and collaborate with the people around you. Holograms in mixed reality don't block out what you can see and hear. This enables you to engage with digital content and tools alongside the objects in your real world. Holograms can be world-locked in a physical location, so you can walk around them, or they can travel with you. You can even hear them in 3D with spatial sound. Microsoft HoloLens is the world's first fully untethered, self-contained holographic computer. With the mixed reality experience of HoloLens, you can stay in the real world and interact with real people as you simultaneously explore 3D in 3D.
Okay, so we're seeing a little bit different point of view between the HoloLens from Microsoft and kind of what we saw before from Oculus and HTC and even PlayStation and Sony, right? I mean, those first three, it was transporting you to a different world, very gaming oriented. The previous video on HoloLens really shows us how we're interacting with the physical and the virtual world meet, or it's sometimes called mixed reality. And so it was an entirely different experience where you could see that there was a biology example where a person's looking at a human anatomy and he could see the way that the muscles and the skeleton all form, right? And so he can walk around it and he can look at it. There's other use cases about walking into a room and seeing a different picture of an automobile. There's all these different use cases because this is how we process the real world, right? We don't process the real world by going to another world. We process the real world by experiencing the real world. So that means we have to live in the real world. And so that's the message of augmented reality. So what if I were to tell you that these glasses here can do everything that those HoloLens could do? Would you believe me? No, you're right. These are not non-prescription glasses that I bought for $19. But hear me out. What you saw with the lens that came out in front of you and sort of this, it actually looks a lot like the Oculus or the Vive, right? It's something that kind of is pretty obtrusive, and it takes up a good percentage of real estate on your head. And none of us are going to be walking around anytime soon wearing those things in the real world. We might work on a factory floor, or we might be in an office, and we might be able to use those in that kind of a way, but we're not going to be using it. I'm not going to be walking around this show floor, nor are you, and interacting with each other that way. It's just not going to happen. However, the technology, the rate of Moore's law, is going to drive the lenses to be smaller and smaller and the chips to be more powerful, to eventually they will be in this kind of a form factor. And if you don't believe me, just turn the clock back a few years ago, and that's essentially what Google Glass was. And Google Glass actually, and that was a few years ago, and they pulled the product from the consumer market, but they've been slowly integrating it into the industrial market. And so I would say stay tuned, because in a few years you're going to see the same kind of functionality that you're witnessing with that HoloLens, but it's going to be in the form factor of something that looks more like this. And oh, there's more. Because it's not just going to be in glasses. More than likely, the technology will eventually get to the point where it will be in a contact lens. And so wrap your mind around that. Now when we have them in contact lenses and regular glasses, we can be walking around and we could be having a dialogue with somebody in another part of the world. Rather than reaching for our phone, a window comes up that I can see in front of me, and it's somebody calling me, and I don't have to do anything different. In fact, if I have BCI integrated into the device, I can actually think about taking that call or not, or tell the glasses not to take that call and think about sending a text message. I know it sounds wild, but that's the world, that's the direction that we're going with the technology. And it's not 50 years off, it's probably 5 years off. Okay, so this is the rapid development that's occurring with all these technologies and a lot of the software that's being developed in and around the system. So we took a look at the HoloLens. This is kind of an interesting company based out of the United States in Silicon Valley called ODG. They have these smart glasses. This is actually another take on mixed reality, augmented reality, and virtual reality. If you put these on, they look pretty much like a standard pair of sunglasses. And you can see here where you see sort of the shading. I can see light through here. So that means, you know, when I'm walking around, I can kind of see the world as if I was wearing a pair of clear, regular old glasses. But then I can also shift and then block out the rest of the light, and then I'm into the virtual world. So it's kind of a take on augmented, it's an early take on this idea of mixed reality, and kind of a form factor that we understand. Most of us wear sunglasses. I do, you do, and so we're used to them, we're comfortable with them. But there's more, because it's not just integrating those two technologies together. This is actually a full-blown computer. It's using a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor. So this is a full-blown computer inside, located right here, attached to those glasses. And so you can do a lot of different things in terms of processing information and doing a lot of different things. And that's really what we're talking about, is mixed media, taking all these different video, images, sound, and integrating them all together in this mixed reality world. But it doesn't end with just viewers and that sort of thing. Probably some low-hanging fruit in terms of virtual reality is being able to use our smart devices like this. This is a device, and somebody is holding it up to a rack, and they can see special pricing, promotions, and deals, right? So this kind of technology exists today, and retailers are probably going to implement this kind of technology where they won't have to be messing around with price tags and special promotions and things like that. We'll probably look at it near term on our viewers, this being the viewer, but eventually we'll be looking at it through these glasses. And we walk into a department store, I can see what's on sale, I can see what's coming next, I can see different promotional items, that sort of thing. So imagine walking down these aisles, but we don't really see the real signs. What we see are the virtual signs. But we're wearing the right glasses so we can see everything that's going on, and somebody wants to get our attention, or somebody wants to promote a certain message, we'll see those messages, but they'll be in this mixed reality world that we're living in. Okay, so how much more time do I have? All right. So so we talked a little bit about all these different use cases and whatnot. I'd like to maybe spend a few moments and talk about some of the trends. So the four major trends I think that affect this idea of mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality are that we're going to see smaller screens, we're going to see a migration to wireless, VR and AR, we're going to see deployment of 5G, and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality is going to meet its cousin, artificial intelligence. So here's a slide produced by the Consumer Technology Association. These are the guys that produce CES, showing the average share of video viewing on a device. And so in 2012, the 62% of people viewed video on their televisions, and 16% on smartphones, 5% on laptops, 14% on desktops, 3% on tablets, and 1% on something else. In 4 years, you can see where now it's 51% are consuming their video on TV, and smartphones have increased by 5% to 21%, and you're seeing laptops 12% and desktops 8%, tablets 7%. So what we're seeing is this phase shift from viewing on big screens to viewing on smaller screens. And I think that's the trend because that's where we're heading. So not that people are going to get up their TVs anytime soon. I mean, TV business is still fairly robust, but it just points that the trend is really getting more content on smaller screens, and that bodes well for devices like virtual reality headsets, augmented reality headsets, right? So here's another data point regarding the transition from viewing or using virtual realities in conjunction with a computer and where we're going there. And so a lot of you, maybe most of you, have experienced some virtual reality already using a mobile device, right? It's a mobile device like a Samsung or any kind of device that fits into a headgear, and you can see that. But the Oculus, the HTC, the Sony, they all require sophisticated computing power, right? The computing power is required so that it serves up the images in such a way that you don't experience this thing called latency. Latency is where there's a delay in terms of what you're seeing, what your brain's telling you that you're seeing. So it requires a pretty sophisticated computer tethered by a cable in order to really experience the robustness of virtual reality and augmented reality, even in the, is kind of what it takes. And so once we get to unless, when you're looking at these mobile phones that are strapped to a viewer, you're not really going to experience the same thing that you would be experiencing if you had an Oculus or a Vive or a PlayStation attached, tethered to a computer. But with wireless AR, VR, now you can unshackle yourself from the computer, so to speak, and you have the full experience of what it's like to be watching content streamed to you wirelessly as opposed to having to be tethered to a computer. So it's just the way we like to be. We don't like to be bounded by wires or locked in or regulated to having to be tethered to something that's where we can only step 3 to 6 feet away from it. We want to be able to walk around and do things. And this is one step in terms of bringing the virtual reality and the augmented reality served up to your head, your brain, wirelessly. And along with that same theme is if I can get that data feed wirelessly, think of like Wi-Fi, right? Before, really what we're talking about doing is having headsets and the content, rather than being tethered to a computer, be as if the Wi-Fi would be feeding it to me. They call that WiGig because it's very high bandwidth over a wireless medium at a short distance, relatively short distance, about what you would expect to see from a hotspot location. But when we get to 5G, and this is the next generation of mobile communications that the phone companies are going to deploy and are in the process of deploying, that's going to game change everything, because I can take that video stream or that content from miles away from a carrier. I don't have to be next to a hotspot in order to receive that robust, massive amount of content. And why is that important? Because if I have one of these devices on, no matter where I'm located, I can be receiving all kinds of massive amounts of content that I would normally have to be connected to a wired network or near a hotspot. And so how much faster is 5G than 3G, 4G? Well, here's a great example. So to download a 2-hour-long movie, in this case, Guardians of the Galaxy, using 3G, it would take 26 hours. You got 26 hours to wait for the movie to be downloaded? 4G, pretty good, 6 minutes. You got 6 minutes? I got 6 minutes. 5G, 3.6 seconds. So you think about it, 3.6 seconds later, you got the movie streamed to you from miles away, wherever the nearest cellular tower is. So you can kind of see that content is going to be served up more and more, is going to be distributed more and more by carriers as opposed to maybe just pure cable companies. In many cases, cable companies are becoming these mobile carriers. But it's going to be a different ballgame here. And we're going to see a lot more content accessible and available to us anytime, anywhere, at any location. This is probably the most exciting thing, in my opinion. We're going to see the world is going to be revolutionized by artificial intelligence. It already is. It's happening. There's a lot of prognostications about when machines will be smart or will take over the universe, and are they our companions or are they our masters? And I won't get into all the philosophy about all that. You can read up on it as much as I can. But it's important to note that artificial intelligence really is going to change things. And the current state of artificial intelligence is probably a lot smarter than we think it is. This concept of deep learning, where machines are getting smarter and smarter, learning from the experience of what's come before it, is going to change how we interact with these devices and how much more intelligent they're going to be, and the use cases are going to explode. So artificial intelligence is already being used for helping doctors diagnose patients' diseases. Artificial intelligence is actually even being creative. I don't have a slide here to show it, but you can see slides that have designs that were actually created by bots. And they're pretty good looking too, You would think a human designed that, but it was an artificial intelligent bot that was designing that. And so that deep learning, the ability to experience software that learns from experience is how humans learn from experience. That's a very important point. And then these neural networks where everything's connected and the algorithms are going to feed back that information and that data and then get even smarter with it. It means that we're going to see a transformation in many, many different areas. But what we're going to be experiencing, we might be experiencing something with virtual or with augmented reality, and we're processing it, and it's being fed up to 5G into the cloud, and it's being saved on some server somewhere, and some bot is looking at that information and deducing some faster path to get to some place or some location, and it's just going to keep getting smarter and smarter, and pretty soon we're going to say, how did that happen? When did that happen? And what's going to happen next? But I take the positive view, so I don't want to scare anybody in here, but it's something that's really going to, I think, change how we experience our world in conjunction with all these other technologies that are coming at us. And here's just something I think in support of that. How many people are familiar with NVIDIA? Yeah? Okay. Well, NVIDIA is the largest supplier of GPUs, or graphic processing units, which is the technology that powers most of these virtual reality headsets and augmented reality headsets. So NVIDIA is known as the leader in that space. And so they made their money doing that. They continue to invest a lot in R&D, and they do a very good job at it. And here's a picture of their CEO who was at CES. And what he's talking about is not their GPU, and he's not talking about virtual reality. What he's talking about is NVIDIA's AI Copilot, artificial intelligence Copilot, because the processing that it takes to do or the amount of processing that's used in virtual reality and to serve up images and coordinate that with all kinds of content takes a massive amount of processing power. And that processing power is the same kind of processing power that's finding its way into all kinds of other applications, in this case, a car that can drive itself. So again, one might think, okay, a company that's made its mark in life by developing chips that are found in virtual reality headsets are now using artificial intelligence to power a self-driving car, right? I mean, it's kind of a transition, right? You might not think that automatically, because it's kind of, if I explain it, hopefully I explain it properly and you sort of, okay, that makes sense. But one wouldn't necessarily go right to, oh, NVIDIA is getting into artificial intelligence and what's going to make them successful? The reason they're successful is because they have a track record of doing processing for virtual reality. So it just shows how one technology is connected to another. How many startups do we have in the audience? Any? This is a Launchpad zone, so I would expect we have at least one or two. All right, this is just kind of a fun slide. So if I have a minute or two, I just wanted to drill down here and say, okay, so if you're a startup, if you're an entrepreneur in the audience, and you want to figure out how to make some money in augmented reality or virtual reality, and you don't have an extra, $1 billion laying around to, come up with the next, technology, here's a couple of quick ideas. One, these AR, VR headsets are not cheap. This generation of headset, costs anywhere from $500 to $700. And the reality, no pun intended, is that not everybody can stand to wear these things for any considerable length of time, but they all want to experience it. And a lot of people want to experience this idea. Otherwise, none of you guys would be here if you weren't interested in the subject matter. So renting AR, VR headsets might be a good way to make a little bit of money, and it gives people an opportunity to experience what it's going to be like. And we all know that Moore's Law is going to take over, and we're going to go from tethered AR, VR headsets to wireless VR headsets to ones that will also be able to pick up 5G. So that's one idea. Another one is create a theater or an arcade experience. This can be done by just having a booth at some event where you're displaying content. So if you're good at content, if you're creative, you can create the content, and away you go. I don't know that I like the idea of selling cardboard headsets, but that's one option too, is provide these as giveaways. Build a community. In other words, find people of like mind that share a common interest, and then develop something in and around virtual reality or augmented reality. Maybe it might be experiencing a meal via virtual reality and finding people that had that same interest level. And I guess it also leads into the same idea of creating content. Content is going to be king. There's a lot of companies that are forming now that are tracking sporting events and recording those sporting events and then streaming that sporting event using the virtual reality and the network that's available. So there's a lot of different ways of making money if you're an entrepreneur. And I think it's a bold new world, this whole idea of virtual reality and augmented reality. It's going to change everything, and it's going to be an exciting journey, and I'm glad that we got to spend a few minutes thinking about it. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, George. So we've got time for one question. Anyone? No? If you have some questions, you can catch George afterwards. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause.